We're good to go? Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome back to another one of our webinars. I'm excited about this one. I know that we were talking about last week in our webinar that we were going to do something with desserts. I think there were a couple of requests. I thought we'd talk today a little bit about plated desserts, and then really kind of show the evolution of plated desserts. And I'm going to say evolution maybe over the last 30 or 40 years, and what we know now as more modern style desserts, and have a reference point with some with a classic style dessert that we might have seen in restaurants in the 80s and 90s. The first thing I want to talk about a little bit is components of a plated dessert, right? We've learned over the years as we start to develop ideas about desserts and components for desserts, it seems to be a pattern where we see 5 particular elements, right? The first element of a dessert is the main element, right? And the main element could be many things. It could be a cake, it could be a tart, it could be a Bavarian, a semifreddo, some kind of a mousse. It could be an entremet, right? Entremet being a layer of mousse with cake on the bottom and some kind of interior, whether it's a gel or some kind of a chocolate interior, or both. Some high-end entremets have a lot of different components. And again, it could range from simple to more complex in terms of the main element, but the main element should be the focus point of the dessert. The second item we look for in a plated dessert is a frozen element, right? Now, frozen elements obviously are your ice creams, your sorbets, your sherbets. All of those things would fall into that category, but sometimes a frozen element could be a semifreddo or a granité, some different stylings of frozen elements. Sometimes the main element itself could be frozen, right? If you do, for example, a frozen souffle or something along those lines where the main element is a frozen element. The third element is a fruit element, some kind of a fruit, right? A fresh fruit, a poached fruit, a macerated fruit as part of a main element. For example, a tart that has fruit inside of it. So fresh fruit or some kind of a poached or cooked fruit would be essential component of a plated dessert. A chocolate element, right? In some cases, the chocolate actually could be the main component, right? In today's demos, we're going to show you a chocolate cake, and then we're going to show you 3 different plate-ups and approaches to that cake, right? Going from classic to contemporary to more modern. Sometimes it could be as simple as chocolate piping or chocolate sauce or chocolate plaquette, a tempered chocolate cutout that's put in for visual appeal. And the final element should be a crunchy or crispy element, right? A cookie, a crunch, something that has some texture to it to give you that sense of, a little texture relief. A lot of times the dessert elements tend to be creamy and rich and have those kinds of textures, so it's nice to have a little relief in the way of something crunchy. And this could be, again, a cookie, a tuile. It could be an element of the main element, right? If you're doing a tartlet, for example, and you have a cookie crust or a tartlet crust on it, that would be a crunchy element. So those are the 5 elements that we look for. Again, a main element, which is the focus of the dessert, a frozen element, a fruit element, a chocolate element, and a crunchy element, right? Okay? So what we're going to do today is we're going to show you my signature chocolate cake, and I'll give you a little bit of history on that cake.
Just real quick, I want to say good morning to everybody in the chat. There's a lot of people saying good morning.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I don't have the chat in front of me, so my boys here are helping me with that. Thank you very much. Welcome to Truman High School. I know Chef Broski's using our webinars as homework assignments, as are some of our ProStart partners and our CCAP partners. So happy to have everybody here. Also, any alumni or current students from CINY, happy to have you here as well. So thank you for joining me. A little history on the evolution of this chocolate cake, right? This signature chocolate cake. So just a kind of a footnote. As part of our competition program at Monroe, and as part of our competitions that I've coached through different institutions over the last 20 or so years, the signature chocolate cake has been a mainstay entry-level dessert competition dish for our pastry students and some of our culinary students that are crossing over into the pastry, want to get some pastry experience in competition. I don't know that there's a dish I've concepted in competition, and I've concepted a few hundred dishes over the last 20 years, maybe more. But this dessert, I think, has had the most, has won the most medals, certainly by far the most gold medals. A lot of our viewers today are familiar with this cake because they've done it in competition. The evolution of the cake came really from the fact that my wife and I, in the early 90s, for about 10 years through early 2000, owned a wholesale and retail bakery operation. We started out wholesale servicing coffee bars and cafes in the city with things like biscotti and brownies and cookies and stuff like that. And that morphed into a retail operation and cafe operation for us. And in the early days of doing the business, we were trying to diversify our product line. If we were making a delivery, for example, to a store, to a cafe or espresso bar, and we were delivering brownies and stuff like that, we wanted to have other items to offer, right? Obviously, you want to increase your sales. One of the requests that we got often were cakes. And in my mindset, at that time, we were putting out a lot of, I was the principal baker and pastry chef for the operation, putting out a lot of product and bulking out stuff. We were a very busy wholesale operation. So for me, the idea of cakes was kind of like, wow, a lot of work, it's intensive. But after a while, my wife, handling all the sales for our business, said, we really need to have something to offer. So I said, well, why don't we do some kind of a chocolate cake with, something that's not layered. I didn't want to get into sponge cakes and things like that. So we were thinking along the ideas of a chocolate torte. I had a great brownie recipe that we developed, and we were selling tons of brownies. And the brownies that we developed were a fudgy type brownie, and they were very popular. So I said, let me work off of that recipe and see if I can enhance it in some way to make it turn into a cake. And I knew that the texture of the brownie was a little too dense. I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. I wanted to make it a little bit less fudgy, a little more chocolatey. So I played around with ratios of sour cream and heavy cream and things that I could add to the basic brownie mix in order to make it work in a cake format. So I hit upon 25% heavy cream. And I added that to the brownie mixture, and I got this wonderful cake that formed from it. And in the early days, the cake was basically the chocolate torte. We dusted it with a combination of granulated instant coffee, cinnamon, and cocoa powder, and we called it a cappuccino cake. And we were selling hundreds and hundreds of these cakes. Fast forward, in the mid-2000s, we had a restaurant operation, my wife and I, and this cake became the signature dessert cake for our restaurant. And one of the things about this cake that's interesting is it really is a blank canvas in terms of flavor. The original cake idea was a chocolate cappuccino. We had coffee mixed into the cake, so there was a little bit of a coffee flavor. As it morphed into a dessert for a restaurant, we started working with different kinds of alcohols like Grand Marnier, rum, stuff along those lines. And settled upon Grand Marnier as one of the principal flavors. But that changed again, depending upon the season and depending upon where we were in the calendar year. We would alter the flavor to accommodate seasonal fruits, things that we might have had. So today's version is going to be the Grand Marnier version I'm going to show you. It is a very simple cake to make. It is made in a sauce pot, and it can be made in advance. The batter can be refrigerated, and then it can be cooked and baked off as needed. So let's get started with that. So I'm starting with a stainless steel sauce pot. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and put some butter into this pot. And we'll have the recipe for you guys if you would like to use that. I'll have my son Frankie just, if you want to reach out, you can direct a comment to me and we'll give you the recipe. But I'm going to call it out now just in case you want to follow it. We're using a half cup of butter, okay? Butter is important, right, for baking. And for this recipe, we want to use a European-style butter, right? And the European-style butter, if we talk about butter in terms of fat percentages and how much butter fat is in traditional butter, typically you're at 80% butter fat. So when you buy whole butter, right, in a block or in a stick, 80% of that that compound that you have there is butterfat, right? And 20% is comprised of whey and water, which are byproducts of the butter making process, right? If you've clarified butter before, what you're essentially doing is you're taking out the whey and the water and just isolating the butterfat. So standard butter has 80% butterfat, but the Europeans' formulations of butter are at 83%. And there are even some butters that go a little bit higher than that. There's a butter coming out of Vermont, from Vermont Creamery, that's 86%. And the difference is really palpable. You can taste the difference in the richness. So when the butter is really important to the recipe, like it is in this case, you want to definitely use a butter that has a high fat content. So the European style butters at 83% are the way to go. I have here our chocolate, right, and sugar and cocoa powder. I'm using a half a cup of sugar, so equal sugar and butter, right? Half cup butter, half cup sugar. I have 2 teaspoons of cocoa powder. I'm using a high-quality Valrhona cocoa powder. I'm also using Valrhona chocolate for this, and this chocolate is a bittersweet. We're probably somewhere around 50% cocoa butter on this one. The higher the percentage in the chocolates, the more bitter the chocolate is, right? Milk chocolate somewhere around 36%, and you can get all the way up to really some heavy dark chocolates. I find the middle-of-the-road chocolate works very well. For you at home, I use chocolate chips primarily in the bakery operation that we had, because we had tons of chocolate chips, and that's what I use, a semi-sweet chocolate. It worked out perfect for this cake, and you can certainly do that. Most important thing, I'm going to put the chocolate, sugar, and cocoa powder in to the butter. The butter has got to be hot, and it's got to be really bubbling, okay? We want to melt the chocolate, and we want to homogenize the chocolate, sugar, and butter together. If the butter's not hot, the chocolate doesn't melt properly, and you don't get a good texture on the cake. So, nice bubbling, you can hear the sound. I'm going to dump my chocolate and sugar and cocoa in, and I'm going to whisk until my chocolate dissolves, melts, and then I'm going to cut the fire, okay? All right, you can see here the chocolate, the butter, all melted together. Okay, I chopped my chocolate up fine. I used a block chocolate. If you use chocolate chips, you don't need to chop them. Okay. And the Valrhona that I'm using here actually is their orange flavored chocolate, which is actually perfect for the Grand Marnier cake. So that works out real well. So we have our chocolate here melted with the sugar, cocoa powder, and butter. Okay, again, a half a cup of butter, half a cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of cocoa powder, and a half cup of bittersweet chocolate. Pretty easy to remember that ratio, right? Half, half, and half. Yeah? So, next, okay, we have an egg here. And here's where I guess people get concerned, right? You're going to put an egg into a hot mixture. Is there an issue? No, there's not. This is actually going to work out just fine, okay? No need to temper. But we want to get that egg in, and we want to blend it with the chocolate. And you will see this becomes very silky, okay? And shiny. Yes?
Does the recipe change when you mix chocolates? Do they have different melting points?
No. Any chocolate that you're going to use here would work. You can make this, again, with the milk chocolate all the way up to really dark chocolate. It's going to give a different flavor. The chocolate obviously is going to give a different flavor, right? So, good question though. My egg is in. I'm going to go ahead now and add my heavy cream. And again, this was a departure of brownie versus the cake. So the heavy cream adding here is what turns this basically brownie recipe into a chocolate cake recipe. I'll get all my heavy cream in, okay? And I'm going to whisk this together until the heavy cream is incorporated. And right now I have a very silky, chocolatey mixture in here, okay? It looks almost like a ganache, but it's not a ganache because we have egg in here, right? There's no egg in ganache, okay? So, again, just so you know, I'm off the fire here. I only had the fire on until the chocolate melted. Then I pulled it off immediately. So, nice and smooth, looks beautiful. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and add Grand Marnier. And here again, you want to use a quality alcohol for the recipe, okay? And we're going to use a half a tablespoon here. I'm not going to measure it, but you get where I'm going with this, right? Grand Marnier is delicious, right? It's an orange-flavored liqueur for our orange cake. I had other options, okay? In the cake that we're using today for our modern dessert, we actually made it with rum, and this Dom Papa rum from the Philippines, which is a delicious, delicious rum. You can actually taste the wonderful molasses that it's made from. So the Grand Marnier went in. Now, I could have gone a few different ways. Maybe I'm doing this dessert in the fall, right? And I want to bring some pear into the dish. Well, Pear William, right, would be perfect. That's a pear-flavored brandy. Maybe I want to do this more towards the summer, right? And I want to take advantage of some beautiful raspberries that are available. So I go with the framboise. Okay, so the flavor of the cake is going to really match the fruit that we're going to serve with it. In this case, orange.
Flavor, Dominic asked if you use white chocolate, would you use less sugar due to the initial sweetness in the chocolate?
It's a good question. Honestly, I've not made this with white chocolate, Dominic, but what I have done is I've garnished it with some white chocolate chunks as the cake come out of the oven, and the white chocolate kind of melts on the top, and I get that black and white effect. That was another style of cake that we did in the bakery, but I've not made this with white chocolate. I've only made this with various types of dark chocolates, but give it a shot and let us know, okay, how it worked out.
Justin asked, what's the name of chocolate brand? You said Valrhona?
Yes, we're using Valrhona chocolate, and the chocolate that we're using is a 54% orange-flavored chocolate, orange-infused chocolate, okay? So, I have and I can smell immediately, the Grand Marnier, the smell of that wonderful orange comes right out. My flour, salt, and cinnamon here, okay? And here again, you want to think about the flavor profile, right? If I were doing this cake and I wanted to have a little coffee flavor, I might put a little bit of espresso, instant espresso powder in here, just to give that nice coffee flavor. And originally, that was in the recipe. For this particular one, we're taking the coffee out, and we're using a little bit of cinnamon in the recipe just to give a little contrasting flavor, right? Flour goes in, sugar goes in, flour, salt, and cinnamon goes in at one shot. I'm going to move my mise en place here. And I'm going to whisk this together just until the flour is absorbed into the batter. Okay? And I go back to Friday and Saturday morning practices at the college when this dish is being practiced. You can smell the chocolate and the Grand Marnier in the air. It reminds me of being back in the kitchens with our competition team. Just again until we've absorbed the flour. We don't want to go in any more than that. This is a beautiful batter. I'm going to actually pour this out into a container, and we'll actually pour it out from the container so you can see the consistency of the batter, okay? No clumps. I didn't sift the flour. I don't have a need to do that. I don't do anything I don't need to do in a recipe, all right? We want to be efficient. So if you take a look here on that batter, look how beautiful that is, right? That is our signature chocolate cake batter, okay?
Kind of like two questions kind of in one here.
Yes.
Curtis Brown asks, how does alcohol affect the flavor? And Sarah asks, is alcohol optional or mandatory?
Yes, alcohol is definitely optional. You don't have to put it in, but when it is in there, you definitely taste the flavor of it. Now, the alcohol itself that's in the liqueur, in this case the Grand Marnier, will dissipate as the cake cooks, so you won't have that alcohol flavor, but what will remain is that delicious, and I would say quintessential Grand Marnier flavor, because there's nothing else like that in the terms of the orange flavor. If you wanted to get orange flavor in here and not use the Grand Marnier for whatever reason, maybe just a touch, a whisper of orange zest would do it. But here again, remember, I'm using a Valrhona orange flavored chocolate, so you may not even need that, okay? So that's really up to you, okay? All right, now, baking. We have lots of options, right? For the desserts that I'm going to do, for two of the desserts I'm going to do today, we're using a small springform pan. You can certainly go into a larger pan. This will make a 6-inch springform pan at 1.5 inches high. We don't want to make this cake too thick, right? It's a very rich cake, so we're going about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. We have our pans are sprayed with a little bit of cooking spray, a little pan release. Okay, we're going to go ahead and fill up our molds here. Okay. And we're going to get these into the oven. Now, we did a great job making the batter, but we're not home free. Because a lot of the problem here we find with this cake is in the actual baking of it, right? So we got to be careful here. We want to be careful in the sense that we don't want to put this in a hot oven, right? We want the oven at 325. We want to make sure that the oven, we're on the lower shelf of the oven. Because what happens here with this cake is if it's in the top shelf of the oven or if the oven is too hot, it's going to mushroom, right? It's going to come up from the egg that's in there, right? Even though there's no leavening, it's going to puff up. You're going to get that dome shape. You're not going to have that beautiful flat contour on the top. So we want to make sure that when we go in, we're going into the lower third of the oven, okay?
Thompson asks, can the use of a mixer change the modify the final texture?
Yes. So we're not mixing, we're not aerating this, we're just blending ingredients, right? So when I think about the term, I'm blending the ingredients, I don't know that I would use a mixer for that. If I'm making a large quantity of this cake, obviously, and we did make 60-quart batches of this, I would use a whip attachment. But again, very low speed. Okay, we don't want to aerate, which is very important. Again, the more mixing and aeration you give the batter, the more puff you're going to get. It's going to change the consistency of the cake. It's also going to change the baking of the cake, right? Because the air is going to expand as it bakes. So you want to keep it very flat. Again, a hand whisk, rubber spatula, that's all you need. We're blending the ingredients together. But that's a good question, yes. Okay, so our cakes are in. I'm just, for my own purposes, going to set a timer here. We're going to go 12 minutes on the timer, and we'll take a look. So let's go ahead and get into our first plate up here, which is our classic presentation. Some of our audience here, probably, I'm not sure, we have some culinary instructors here, but if you go back, as I do, a few years, these kinds of desserts are the kinds of desserts that we saw on menus in the 80s and 90s, right? And you're going to watch the evolution as we do our plates here of how the dessert's going to change, not just in appearance, but also in portion, right? Okay, so let's do our first one. Okay. Our first dessert is going to feature our chocolate cake with some creme anglaise. Okay, again, this is our classic version, right? And we're using the cake that we baked in the springform as it came out of the springform pan. Okay, I just want to make one alteration here. Move my notes here out of the way. Okay. We're going to go ahead and take our cake and we're going to dust it with some cocoa powder just to give it a finish, okay? And here I have some Valrhona cocoa powder in a little strainer basket, and we're just going to give it a light dusting, all right? Okay. And we're going to go ahead and center plate that cake right in the creme anglaise, okay? Again, a simple procedure, simple technique. Again, we're looking at a classic presentation of what you might see on an old menu. And actually now we see these kinds of presentations coming up on some, and I'm not disparaging diners, right? But these larger portions of cake and things like that we see, okay, on the menu, okay? In diners and such like that, where the portion size is large, right? We're going to go a little bit of hot water here. I'm using a raspberry ice cream here, which I churned this morning, okay? And I'm using a traditional method of scoop here, right? So I have an ice cream scoop we're going to simply go with, again, we're going with the classic approach. Ice cream on top. The cake is slightly warm. It came out of the oven just about 15 minutes before we started this broadcast, so the cake is still warm to touch. Okay? And the last thing we're going to do here, and again, keeping with the classic presentation, is we're going to go ahead and put some raspberries on the plate, right? And again, I can remember almost every dessert in the 80s when I worked in restaurants, everything was garnished with raspberries, right? That just seemed to be the go-to, right? Okay? All right. So the warm chocolate cake, raspberry ice cream, fresh raspberries, a light dusting of cocoa on top of the cake, and the creme anglaise. Now my question is, does this fit all of the components of a plated dessert that I gave you at the start of this broadcast? I want to wait for the answer to that. Is there something missing? I'm going to wash my hands. Remember the 5 components of a plated dessert that I gave you on the outset of this. Does this plate have them all? Do we have them all? I missed a big 80s touch here. My apologies while I'm waiting for the answer. Do we get the answers yet, boys? What's missing? Ah, okay. Who said that? Brandon Spence. You are 100% right, son. There's no crunch. And Curtis, very good. Okay, so again, we talked about 5 components of a plated dessert in the evolution of plated dessert. So going back to our classic presentation, we're not seeing the crunch element, but we will on the next one. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this off to the side. I want to get a close-up of that. And we'll work on our next element. Okay, so our next presentation is going to be the same chocolate cake, right, the orange, but now we're going to add some elements to this, okay? This is going to be our more contemporary styling. Okay, warm Grand Marnier cake, vanilla ice cream, orange supreme, orange zest, and we're going to use an orange shortbread cookie. Wow. Okay, this is pretty cool. So let's get started here. I wanted to do a little bit of knife work for you. We're going to start here with some orange supremes. And for the orange supreme, okay.
Dominic Costantino out of Park Slope asks, are mint leaves an old school garnish?
Mint leaves are actually really old school, right? And here again, we might see them on a plate like this, no question. You would see, but in a contemporary setting, you would see mint, but in a different format, perhaps micro mint or something along those lines. So it's a good question. All right, so we have an orange here. And last week we talked about success in the restaurant business, and we talked about, making money and protecting waste. I'm going to take and segment this orange so I get those beautiful orange segments out of it. But I'm losing an opportunity to utilize the zest here and the skin. Now, yeah, I could use that in the recipe. I can grate it or whatever. But I'm actually going to use it as a component of this dessert. And in order to do this, I'm actually going to just take some strips here before I get started with my segmenting. Okay? And we're going to do a quick julienne here. Okay, of our strips so we can get a nice garnish on our plate with the oranges, right? So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to start to just cut some julienne strips here with my knife. I have a pot of water on the fire here, which I'm using for blanching, and we're going to let these orange strips blanch, okay, for about 3 minutes to get some of that bitterness out of them, and then we're going to put some sugar on them. So you can see we have a nice julienne here. Going to go up all the way with my fire here, and we're going to get these orange pieces into the machine, into the blanching liquid here, okay?
We have some alums that are excited to see you Supreme. They haven't-
Awesome, wow, okay, terrific. All right, so, with Supreme in the orange, we have a couple of things that we want to be careful of. The orange is round. It's naturally going to go to one side or the other, right? So a lot of times what we see is a student will take the orange to Supreme, and they'll go to cut it, but look at the angle of the orange, right? The orange has lost its center. So we want to be careful. We want to keep the orange upright. We want to make a straight cut through till we see the segments on the other side. Same thing here. We want to make a straight cut through till we see the segments on the other side, okay? Now, from here, we're going to go around the orange to the bottom. We're removing the skin and the pith, okay, of the orange. Nice sharp knife here. I'm using a utility knife from my kit, which I also actually use for filleting fish, because I like the feel of this knife. This is one of my oldest knives in my collection. I had this knife when I started culinary school a lot of years ago, right? Okay, I'm going to come around all the way to the bottom, making sure we get all of that membrane out. Okay?
Would you mind just moving the papers so we can get...
Yeah, absolutely, son. Okay? And just to keep an eye here, we're about a minute and a half in on the blanching here of the orange, so we want to keep an eye on that. Okay? And here I'm going to come back and just make sure I have all of the pith removed from my orange. Okay? And I want to keep the contour of the orange and the shape nice and round. Okay? So I get a beautiful segment out of the orange here. Get all that membrane. We're really down to the beautiful segments of the orange here. Okay? All right. The biggest complaint we always get from our students is when we get oranges that have seeds in them. All right? You want to use a seedless orange and a large orange because you want a nice segment here. Okay? And a super sharp knife. You can see this knife, I just drag it across like a razor. Okay? Super sharp. Okay? Let's go ahead and get rid of these peels. Now, I'm going to get rid of the peels, but I want to remind you again, since we are consistent with our thoughts here, these are excellent to use for candied citrus, right? And the way you do that is you take your knife here, you remove this membrane here, okay? All right? And you cut these into bâtonnets, and you candy them the same way we're candying the zest, okay? All right? And this can be used in a variety of different dishes, okay? So that's our bâtonnet of skin that we're using. We're going to put this to the side, okay? I also use that from orange marmalade. And I can smell these cakes because I have 50 seconds left. They look wonderful, but they're not done yet. I'm going to give a quick turn around here, and we're going to give them another 6 minutes. And remember, always set a timer when you're baking something, right? We don't like to have anything get burnt up. Okay, so let's do our segmentation. Now, if you notice, we have a beautiful framework here to follow. We have the segments that are just right there for us, okay? And we're going to go ahead and get those right out, okay? All right, beautiful sharp knife. Works out real well. I'm not going to take them all. I'm just going to go here. I know you guys want to see the plate up, so. But I would follow the same pattern all the way around. Okay? And we're going to go after a couple of nice segments here. Let's see what we got. Perfect. Okay? All right. Let's put that to the side for now. Wipe this up. We have our zest now, okay? It's ready to go. Let's go ahead and put that on a parchment sheet here. I'm going to reuse that parchment I just had and let that dry out a little bit before we put some sugar on it, okay? Because the zest is very thin, we don't need to cook it that long. If we had a larger zest, if we were using the bâtonnet of zest, we might want to blanch it a couple different times, okay?
Christian Hudson asks, what is one common misconception that can possibly ruin just a dish like this?
I think you want to follow the adage that less is more, right? Less is more. A lot of times we put too many things on the plate because we can. We can make cremuse and namalakas and different kinds of creams and different kinds of stuff. But you want to stay true to the main element. Think about what the main element wants, right? If you have an orange-flavored cake, maybe the orange cake wants to have some oranges with it, right? And you're playing off of that theme. And you're going to see the same with our banana dessert in a moment, right? So, we have our oranges. We have our plate. And here, as I mentioned, we're going in a different direction now, right? I'm going to take that same cake that we took, but this time we're going to do what? We're only going to serve half. Now remember, we're going to a contemporary plating. I want you to see what happens to the portion size here. Okay? We're going to take a little bit of sugar on top of our oranges, just to accentuate the sweetness a little bit. And I'm going to melt that sugar on top of the orange. I'm not bruleeing it, I'm not coloring it, I'm just liquefying the sugar, and what that does is it gives that a big shine. Now, I could do the same with simple syrup, but with simple syrup, what else do I get? I get moisture, right? Don't want the moisture, okay? So, here we're going to go ahead and do our oranges now on top of our cake. Okay, it's got that little bit of sugar on there. Okay. Terrific. We have our zest here. We want to take our zest. We're going to put some sugar in there, dry it up a little bit. This usually takes a little bit of time to do, but you can certainly use it just the way it is. It's always best to let this dry a little bit. Okay, let that moisture dry out. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and take that zest and just go right on top here of the oranges, right? Again, another contrasting flavor and utilization of the orange. Okay. So far so good.
Shauna asks, can you only use water, or can you use something like lemon juice to cook the zest in?
You want to take that pungency, Shauna, out of the orange. So you want to definitely use water, plain water, no salt, just to dissolve that astringency that the zest has. And again, if it's large pieces of zest, you want to probably blanch it a couple of times, right? For the very thin strips that we had, one blanching is enough. I let it cook for about 3 minutes. I take it out, let it dry thoroughly, and then we sugar them. And once they're sugared, it's an ingredient that will last a long time, even at room temperature in an airtight container. But no lemon juice for that, okay? So we have a crunch element that we're missing. So, following the theme of the dessert, okay, which is orange, we want to go ahead and use a piece of orange shortbread cookie, okay, for our base, for our dessert. For our ice cream, right? Because we're missing a couple of components here. I'm going to go ahead and warm this up just a bit. I should have taken it out of the refrigerator. Shortbread is high butter content, so obviously when you refrigerate it, it gets really, really stiff. Okay? So my buzzer's going off. Let's go ahead and take a look at our cake here. Yes, they look good. Okay? What I'm looking for here on the cake is I want to see level top. It's just starting to crack at the surface, which tells me I've fully cooked the egg in there. I've got steam coming through, so I'm happy with where these cakes are. I'm going to take them out, and we're going to go ahead and let those cool.
Sarah Bailey asks, what is your favorite flavor combination with chocolate cake?
You know what? I've had the orange cake so much that I really like it. But I will tell you what's interesting to me. I really enjoy this cake with cherries, right? So I would do in the liquid portion, I would put in some kirsch, which is a cherry flavored liqueur. Okay. And I would just cook some poached cherries, fresh cherries, of course, poached in a little bit of vanilla simple syrup. That's a great combination. It really is delicious. Okay? All right, we're going to cut our timer here. Okay, now, I have orange fruit. I have orange zest. We want to go ahead and utilize some orange ice cream, okay? So this ice cream, we made a creme anglaise. Let's see if I can find my quenelle spoon here. Okay, it's in the creme anglaise. All right. We made a creme anglaise and we added just a whisper of orange zest to it, right? Just to give it that orange flavor profile. And it made a really nice, okay, ice cream. Really had just a very mild orange flavor, not over the top, okay, but very tasty, okay? And we're going to go ahead and cut a quenelle out of this. And I had some options. I could have also probably I could have done my quenelle also. I could have put the orange zest on top of the quenelle as well, but we're going to keep this traditional. Okay? Right on top of the cookie. Okay? And here we have our contemporary plated dessert. Let's see, does that contain all of the components that we're looking for? I'll wait for you guys to answer. Let's do our check, right, to make sure we have everything there. Okay.
A few questions if you want to.
Yeah, I'll take a couple of, absolutely.
So first is from Dominic. He says, is there a risk of losing or muddling the flavor of the zest using different liquids to blanch the zest?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to just stay with straight water for the blanching, right? If you wanted to add a little bit of sweetness to it at that last blanching, if you blanch it once in just plain water, maybe you want to do it a little bit of simple syrup. Quite honestly, I find for me, I blanch in water, I put the sugar on after the fact. I wind up at the same place that I would if I blanched it in simple syrup. There's some different schools of thought, but I think it's just straight water for that. Another question?
Brianna asks, how would you know if you need to blanch the zest again if the size is slightly larger?
Yeah, so you want to taste it, right? Ultimately, you're going to blanch, you're going to cool it down in some cold water, you're going to taste it. If it has too much bite, you're going to blanch it again, right? It really depends upon the size that you cut it. For this one here, I didn't taste it, obviously, after I blanched it, but because I've done this so many times, I know when I have a very fine strip like that, it goes real quick. And the orange flavor is present, but I don't have the bite of the zest, right, because I blanched it, right?
Chantel home.
Yeah.
She asked, for the cake, would you add a filling to the cake, and if so, would it be a solid filling or liquid?
I would not add a filling to the cake. You might play around with some toppings on the cake. Again, the idea here is we want to serve the cake warm. So when you serve something warm, you have limitations to what you can put on it or in it. But the consistency of this cake is so creamy and so wonderful that as it is on its own, there's really no enhancement, right? You might serve it, we have done it as an individual element where we put put some ganache on top to give it a little bit of a different look and served it cool. But quite honestly, this cake is best when eaten at room temperature or warm. Okay, and we'll show you. I'll cut into the other half that I have here so you can see what that looks like, okay? Do we have all the components?
There's some people, they're saying a sauce, you're missing a sauce.
Why? Why do I need a sauce?
I don't know, that's what they're saying.
What would you put on it? Just out of curiosity. Because I have a sauce on there. I have a sauce on here, but the sauce is frozen, right? Yes? So think about it, right? Again, we're talking about contemporary conceptualization, right? So this is a sauce, right? That's a creme anglaise that we used on the first dessert, right? But what is the ice cream made from? Okay, so if I put creme anglaise on here as a sauce, right, I would be redundant in the ice cream and the sauce. Now, it is true, I could use the creme anglaise, but then I can't use the ice cream, right? Because I'm putting two of the same elements on the plate, right? In different format, but really, when you melt the ice cream, what is it? Yeah, creme anglaise, right? So if I wanted to do a creme anglaise type sauce here, or a zabayon type sauce, which is a high-fat sauce with egg yolk, etc., I'd have to switch over to a sorbet, but hold that thought, because we're going to show you that too on the next one, okay? So, our contemporary style dessert, okay?
So Paula asked, so the ice cream is the sauce?
Correct, right? Because what happens to the ice cream when you eat it? It liquefies, right? And therein lies the sauce, right? And here again, some people might say, well, it needs what? It needs to have some, maybe put some raspberry sauce on there, right? But where's the contrast to that? If we're focusing on the chocolate and the fruit of the orange and the shortbread cookie for the crisp and the frozen element with the ice cream, you don't need to have all those things, right? And here again, I think in one of your earlier questions, I'm not sure who it was, about, simplicity in thought, right? You got a lot of components there. You've got the orange, you got the orange zest, you've got the chocolate cake, you've got the ice cream, you've got the cookie. So you're meeting all five elements, right, without being excessive, okay? Let's go ahead and do our final dessert here. And for the final dessert, we are going to change our plating a little bit here. We are going to go to what we call a scattered plate. And we are going to go to the same chocolate cake, okay? But let's take a look and see what happened to our portion size on the cake, okay? All right. So I'm using what we call an entremet ring, right? No bottom, okay? Sometimes people use this for plating. They put stuff in and they lift it, but these can be used for baking. However, with this cake, because it has no bottom, you got to put something on the bottom. So what we did here is we have a piece of shortbread, okay? When in the bottom of the mold, we pour the cake batter in, we bake it off. So it's a cookie dough on the bottom. So we got the cake and now we have a cookie underneath. Keep that thought.
Do you need the shortbread on the bottom?
If you don't put the shortbread on the bottom, when you pour the batter in, the batter will leak out from the bottom of the mold, okay? You could do it with some foil underneath, but the cookie serves a purpose here that we want to understand, okay? So the idea behind this was really two things. One was the idea for banana and an opportunity to use dampapa, right? The rum that we have here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of banana here. I'm going to put a touch of butter in my pan. Okay, just to get this started up here. And we're going to use some bananas, and we're going to do the bananas a couple different ways here. So I have a fresh banana here. We're going to peel this off. And I'm going to cut a couple of coins here from the banana. A couple a little bit thicker. So we're going to go about a 1/2 inch thick here. I'll do 4 here. And then we're going to cut some smaller bananas into discs, okay, that we're going to put on top of the cake, okay? the rest of our banana there.
Sean asks, for the last dish that you did, could you do like a raspberry or strawberry sauce served hot as bowl?
You absolutely could do a strawberry sauce or raspberry sauce, but then what we're really doing, Sean, is we're really thinking about color more than we're thinking about flavor. If I'm trying to celebrate the chocolate cake and the orange, that's the plate, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with it. You could put some mint leaves on there, you could put some other things on there, but again, we're thinking about color and flavor. What I'm trying to get you guys to think about is having a concept and following through on it from a consistent standpoint. Okay? So my butter's sizzling. I'm going to put in my banana morsels here, with just a sprinkle of sugar to caramelize. Okay? A little bit in the butter there. And then, of course, you know I got to use this Don Papa rum here. And again, it's not a requirement, but we do use these kinds of things frequently when we're baking and cooking. Okay, and we're going to flambe the rum. Okay? And that's as far as I want to go with the banana. We're going to go ahead and take those off. I'm going to move my cake for a second. We're going to go ahead and take these bananas, and we're just going to give a quick shingle here of our bananas on top of the cake. Okay, do one more here. Okay, and some sugar. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to take these bananas that we've just cooked, okay, and I've made this delicious streusel. And I think many of us have made something like this before. We've made a muffin with a streusel topping, right? Or we made a crumb cake. Streusels are crumb mixtures, right? They give us an opportunity to add flavor. They give us an opportunity to add some nuts to the dish, right? Because I have a little bit of almond in here. And they also give us an opportunity to get some crunch in a different format on the dish, right? So I have these beautiful bananas here, and we're going to go ahead and coat them in our streusel here. This streusel is made with muscovado sugar, which is a very dark brown sugar, right? Okay, it's got that rich molasses flavor, and I like that here because, as I mentioned earlier, the rum that we're using, this Filipino rum, Don Papa, has a very strong and wonderful molasses flavor. So we're really picking up on that tone from the rum and bringing it to the banana here, all right, and to the streusel, all right. So I have my banana morsels here, okay. And again, we're looking at a modern presentation. We're going to talk about the nuances of modern desserts in a moment when we have the plate in front of us, okay? So our streusel is there. Come back to that in a moment. I'm going to pop this in the oven real quick. I want to warm the cake and the bananas, okay? And we're going to take a little bit, okay, of our creme anglaise here, all right. We're going to take a little bit of our streusel, okay. Right. So, what were the temperatures on the plate, on the first one, the classic? What were the temperatures? Were there different temperatures there? How many different temperatures were there? I'll wait for you guys to answer. I'll take a sip of this coffee.
Quick question, Thompson asks, have you ever combined this cake with a Dutch cake?
No, this is one that stands on its own merit, right? Okay. So we have, temperature-wise, a frozen element on the first dessert. with the chocolate cake, which is warm, and we have a cool anglaise. On the second cake, the oranges are cool, the cake is warm, the ice cream's frozen, the cookie's at room temperature, right? So let's see how we're going to play this one out. So, my bananas on top of the cake, all right? I want to give them a little brulee, right? So we're getting an element of flavor and crunch here, okay? I have that sugar, that granulated sugar, which I put on. I'm using a blowtorch. Everybody likes to use the blowtorch, right? I'm melting that sugar, and I'm giving that sugar a nice crunch, okay? A hard caramel. Okay? And that's going to go ahead and sit on our sauce here. I want these bananas hot, so I'm going to put them back in the oven. I want you to go into that banana with the crunchy exterior, that streusel topping, and I want that banana to be creamy inside and pick up on the sugar and butter flavors that we have. So we're going to put those down, okay? We have here a mango fruit gel. We're going to go ahead and put some dots of this on our plate. Okay? Rather haphazardly. So no particular pattern, because we're going for a scattered presentation here. Okay, my spoon. Okay. Our bananas. Give them another 30 seconds. Now, thinking about, we talked about the fruit sauce, the ice cream as an anglaise, etc. So in this particular dish, we have an anglaise. So we have a cream base already, right? So I'm not going to put ice cream on here, all right? I also have some fruit in the way of a fruit gel. So I have that mango, right? That mango puree, which we cook with some sugar. We actually use something called agar-agar, which I want you to do some research on. Agar-agar, put that in the chat. For the student, A-G-A-R, agar-agar, for the fruit gel, okay? I can't go with an ice cream, but I want a frozen element here, so I'm going to go with a sorbet instead. And the sorbet that I'm using today is a roasted banana sorbet, okay? This is going to give us that wonderful banana flavor without fat, right? Because we know that the ice creams have fats, right, in them, yeah? Okay, but sorbet has no fat. It's just simple syrup, right? Equal parts of water and sugar together. Okay, simple syrup. And fruit puree. In this case, we have banana puree. And the interesting thing about this one is with the banana puree, we roasted the bananas in the skins, right? We roasted them in the skins. They got nice and soft, nice and tender. We pureed them with the simple syrup, and we turned it into a sorbet. So we have the other frozen element, okay? Here, we're going to go in with our hot banana morsels, okay, with that beautiful streusel on top, okay? Let's go ahead and put this guy over here to make room for the sorbet, okay? It's a little bit frozen, this ice cream here, but we're going to work it out.
Chef Broski, he asked, would passion fruit gel work?
Yes. Passion fruit gel would work, Chef, and also, just so, and for the sake of full disclosure, there's some Dom Papa in that mango as well, right? Okay? Okay, so we have our modern dessert here, okay? The chocolate cake, caramelized bananas. We're going to call that banana brulee, right? Like the traditional creme brulee. We did a brulee on the top of the banana. A little bit of creme anglaise here, straight vanilla creme anglaise. The apples are, the bananas are caramelized and then coated in that beautiful muscovado sugar streusel, right? Again, very simple recipe. Streusel, typically flour, sugar, butter, right? And some nuts in there. Okay? And our roasted banana ice cream. Okay? Let's see if we could put these all, kind of show the evolution for discussion purposes, boys. Okay? All right. So let's put this away. And let me just show you, if I can, so you can appreciate this when I cut into this cake, the texture. Since you are unable to taste anything, I feel badly for you, but zoom in on this here, son, if you can. Okay? All right? You can see this wonderful texture here. Okay? Melts in the mouth. Such a nice cake, such a nice recipe. Okay, so questions. You have the 3 desserts in front of us here. We'll take some questions.
Well, first, Jeffrey was asking for a shout-out because the banana cake was her first gold medal.
Yes, absolutely, Genevieve. Yes, I was thinking about you as I was canneling there, and I said, Genevieve's going to be critical of my cannelle. Not too bad, right? Yes, a shout out to Genevieve, representing Team CINY. Genevieve was the pastry chef from our championship culinary team last year, went all the way to nationals. What else you got?
Chantel, is there a different way to plate the dessert?
Yeah, you know, plating is something that really is up to the individual, right? There are a lot of different ways to go. We could have plated this in a similar format to that. You know, using different types of plates. I wanted to showcase a handmade maple plate. You saw us use this in the salad a couple of weeks ago that I made in my wood studio. You have a lot of options here in what you can do with your desserts. So, yeah, that's really up to you. We could have taken the oranges off the cake here. We could have done some different things. It's fun to play with. One of the things you want to be thinking about with plating, particularly a dessert like this, which has multiple components of temperature, right? You've got frozen, you've got warm, you've got hot, okay? You've got cool. You've got to manage the plate so that you can get all those things to the point. Notice that we did the sorbet was the last element. The frozen element, always the last element, okay? And our ice creams today were all homemade ice creams. And in all these ice creams, we use something called locust bean gum. Put that in the description put that in the commentary for us. The locust bean gum gives us stability. You see this ice cream was plated 20 minutes ago, right? 15 minutes ago, and the ice cream is still holding, okay? It's still holding. Okay, the sorbet is still holding. So those are important considerations. If I'm doing a banquet, for example, I'm putting out a ton of these items, right? I want to be able to get the ice cream down last and get it to the guests. But remember, the guest is not eating this dish in 1 minute, right? They're going to get it. They're going to reflect on it. They're going to take it all in. They're going to start eating and tasting. You want to try to hold temperature for as long as you can, okay? Because I have hot and cold elements on this plate, we want a room temperature plate. We talked about that with our salad a couple of weeks ago. When you have multiple temperatures on a plate, you want to strike a balance at room temperature, right? You want to keep the plate at room temp, okay? Good questions, though. More.
Dominic, he said, he hates to bring this up, but what is your viewpoint on healthy desserts involving superfruits?
No reason to hate bringing it up. I think it's a great question. Look, I have no problem with healthy desserts, and there are a lot of things you can do in all of the types of formats. In a contemporary and modern setting, that you can do with fresh fruits and cakes that are more, lower fat content, lower sugar content. There are plenty of natural sweeteners out there now, like agave and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do. I'm very open to all of those things. These were not examples of desserts that would be quote-unquote healthy, but again, as part of an end point of a meal, a multi-course menu where you're tasting a bunch of things, you're having a wonderful dinner, you make some decisions about how you want to eat the remainder of that day, right? When you know you're going to have a special meal or a special, dinner experience. Moderation, right, is the key. But yeah, all of these things can be done in a healthy way. Now, I've never attempted to deconstruct my cake and make it a healthy recipe because it is what it is, right? But again, if you notice, Dominic, right, what's happened to our portion size as we went from the classic of, 30, 40 years ago, right, a basic, plate up of a dessert that you'd find in a restaurant in the 80s or 90s. We went into more contemporary style, portion size got smaller, and then when we came here, the portion size got even smaller. So we are being mindful of the trends in healthy eating and in nutrition, but also in the trends of interest, right? People want something interesting. We don't want a piece of pie with a piece of ice cream on it in a fine dining operation, right? We want to be wowed. We want to see some more things. So here's an example. You have 4 different elements of banana with the chocolate cake. It's interesting conceptually, right? It follows a particular theme. It's a great winter dessert, right, because you don't have fresh fruits in the Northeast, right, where you can kind of get some beautiful peaches and stuff. Don't know that I would serve this particular dessert in this format in the middle of summer when I have access to peaches and cherries and berries and things like that. But certainly this was a mainstay for my restaurant in the wintertime. I used a lot of bananas and pineapples in the winter because actually bananas are globally seasonal. Pineapples are particularly seasonal, as is citrus in the winter months, right? So we're able to get those from different sources. So I think you want to think about those things, but I think we follow the trend of healthier, mindful eating. Portion sizes come down, etc. Good question.
Genevieve asks, what is your favorite dessert?
Wow. I got to be honest with you. I don't know that I have a favorite. I like desserts in general, and I've concepted hundreds of desserts. But I love the newer concepts that we've been coming up with playing off of different themes of flavor. The dessert that Genevieve did last year, we did a frozen lemon mousse. We had lemon and basil and olive oil flavors. Very contemporary thinking, right? For desserts, and I thought that was a delicious dessert with strawberries and such. Again, very seasonal for the summer. But we've run the gamut on different things, and quite honestly, I appreciate the quality of flavors, right? I appreciate the seasonality. I appreciate the freshness. I appreciate, if you're going to make a dessert, put butter in it. Get some good butter. You know what I mean? Get something that we could really. You're going to take. You don't have dessert all that often. If you're going to do it, let's do it, and let's do it at a high level, and let's really enjoy it, right? So the butters we're using today, European style, really get good flavor out of it.
Someone asked, referring to the agar, if you could just use gelatin, so if you want to speak to the differences between those two.
Yeah, so there's a wide array of things that we can use that are in the molecular gastronomy category. There's xanthan gums, agar, guar gums, locust bean gums, etc. Everything has its own property, right? Gelatin, agar is very different than gelatin for 2 reasons. One, and it's the big reason that most people don't realize, gelatin is a meat product, right? It's gotten from collagen from meat bones, right? From pigs, from horses, etc. So it's not vegetarian, right, or vegan. Agar is a plant-based product. Agar gives you what you get with gelatin. However, gelatin is temperature sensitive, agar is not. So agar will have its consistency cold, room temperature, or even to some degrees of warmth, not more than 100 or so degrees, a little more than body temperature. It will hold its consistency. Gelatin will not. Gelatin melts at body temperature. So if you gelatinize something, it's going to melt when it gets warm. So it would not work in making the gum, in making the gel. And also you would not get the shine that you get from the agar if you're using gelatin. Right? So yeah, there are different applications there. The biggest issue is temperature sensitivity, and the fact that it's not a vegetable-based product, it's a meat protein-based product.
Sean asks, could you do the same thing with a vanilla cake or a different flavor cake, or would you have to use different fruits and flavors?
Yeah, you could, this dessert, you take the chocolate cake away, you want to put in a different flavor. A banana cake would be really good here, a warm banana cake. Maybe you play around with the concept of it. You cut it into you make a sheet of banana cake and you cut it into a cube and put that in there. You make smaller cubes of banana cake and scatter them around. There are a lot of different options that you can do. What you want to think about when you're doing a plate of dessert is, what's my main element? Remember, that's the focus. And what does that main element encompass? I got the chocolate from the main element, so I don't need to pipe chocolate here, right? I don't need to put any more chocolate on this plate. I got the chocolate already boxed off. Do I have a crunch element built into it? I do happen to have a crunch element in the cake because I have that shortbread on the bottom, as you recall, right? We had the shortbread cookie bottom here on the cake. Right? But I went with the streusel as well because I brought in some different flavors. That streusel has a little hint of ginger and a little bit of cinnamon in there as well, which I thought played very well with the dessert. Think about the flavors. And with young culinarians, and I think that's a great question, think about flavors. We always think about presentation and color. And there was a mindset of that years ago when we were not quite as evolved in American cuisine as we are now. Where it was, let's put some red pepper on there. Let's put a strawberry on there. Let's throw some raspberries on there because it brought color, right? Let's throw some sprigs of mint on there. It's a different ball game now, right? I could have put some micro mint in here, but for me, that would have been me putting something on for visual impact. I don't need mint in this dessert, right? I don't need any kinds of micros in this dessert. I need the chocolate and the banana and the different temperatures that work so well with it. So think about flavor. Think about that main element and build around it. I got this really great cake. I got this really great thing. I got this really wonderful... Think about that and build around that and see how you're going to enhance that, right? Not take away from it, okay? Or cloud it. That's a good question, though, Shona. Any more questions for me? Some great stuff. We're good?
I don't know if you want to speak about any dishes you concepted with this cake that you really have been successful and that you really
So this cake has, as I mentioned at the outset of the broadcast, we did a tremendous amount of different variations on this cake. I think one of the most stunning of this cake was we did a chocolate s'mores version with homemade marshmallow on top of the cake, a graham cracker crust underneath the cake. So in place of the cookie, we did graham cracker crust that you would use for a cheesecake, for example. And that then paired, with some other garnishes. But to give it that smoky campfire taste, we actually took that dessert, we put it into a glass vessel with a lid, and we injected smoke into the glass using a smoking gun. And we did a smoked chocolate s'mores cake, which remains the highest scoring dish we've ever had in a competition. That was a 98-point dish, and that was done by one of our team pastry chefs from our team 2 years ago, Julie Velasquez, and others have done that dish as well and gotten gold medals with it, but not quite to that level, which was, it was an exquisite performance, but really delicious dessert. I mean, you think about marshmallow and chocolate and the graham cracker, I mean, just, great stuff. All right.
If you want to ask for a shout out for the boys behind the camera.
Yeah, my son Frankie's handling our moderation, and Jake behind the camera. Thank you boys very much, doing a great job. Spot is my faithful companion. No chicken for Spot today, so he didn't get a chance to get a little bite, and we don't give him any chocolate. But I appreciate the time you guys took out of your day to watch this broadcast. We really appreciate it. I'm going to come back again next week. I have some ideas. I was inspired by a gift I received from a former student a couple days ago who took something I showed him several years ago and actually turned it into a business. So maybe I'll give that a shout out for next week's demo and maybe give you guys some ideas of how you might get into the gourmet food business, okay? Again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.